Hello, good, beautiful morning, everyone. My name is Lynn Schumann. I work for LinkedIn. I'm a journalist at LinkedIn. I am so with LinkedIn, of course, I deal every day and I engage and I interact with professionals who are trying to go out of their ways to find the right skill set for the right job. I'm also a millennial. I know what living without the internet means, but at the same time, I am pretty much addicted to my phone. I am an expat. I moved countries to find better job opportunities. What else am I? I'm a journalist, and I'm told every now and then that basically my job will be and is threatened by a robot. So basically what I'm trying to say as an introduction is that I'm super excited, thrilled, and a bit scared of this session because this session will carry a lot of insight about the technological advancements that are forcing us to change the way we think about jobs, and it carries also recommendations about what we should do, what governments should do, what policymakers should do in order for us and for everyone to be prepared for the massive changes that are happening in the job market and in terms of us to be ready skills-wise. We're going to base our discussion on a very insightful report that was just released today. This report on a second edition this year is done by the UNDP, PwC, and MBRF. So basically this report talks about the future of knowledge, what it means, what is needed. It talks about the right infrastructure for knowledge. It defines what is the infrastructure of knowledge in a certain countries or in certain countries. And it gives the recommendation to policymakers to move ahead with developing the right strategies in that sense. So let's start first with laying down the grounds by introducing and discussing, asking the question, what do we mean when we say knowledge? Do we mean education? Do we mean innovation? Do we mean training? What do we mean when we say knowledge? So I will invite Mr. Jan Strussen. I'm so sorry for the pronunciation, Mr. Jan. He is a strategic advisor and he's the founder of Resting. So basically, he works on advisory projects on questions about future and on reskilling. So let's hear a presentation by Mr. Jan first about knowledge as a concept, and we're gonna base our discussion on the presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be here and to address you and to speak on this topic, future of knowledge from linear to exponential. And we have been, as was said, in this process with this future of knowledge report the last 2 years, PwC, myself, and UNDP and MBRF. So let me start to say that this is not about history, it's about future. And the point is that knowledge is something which we have been talking about a lot of. It's not easy to gain knowledge. It's kind of heavy, like this report, to gain, but it's very easy and very light to use it and to carry it on. And the question is, what Plato said, this is about truth. Yes, there's a lot of truths. There's a lot of statistics, there's a lot of stuff out there, but it's also about our beliefs. What do we really believe in, linked to what is going on right now? And it says outside here when we came, it's time to explore the future. It's time to explore the future of knowledge. So I think this is an in-between space. And I think knowledge development is being developed in that in-between space, between the truths and between the beliefs. So let us kick off and see what we can think about, because the situation as such is that knowledge is not limited to traditional education and training. Knowledge develops constantly, and it's about a multi-dimensional thing. It's human flow, creativity, innovation, but it's relationship-based. Without a solid relationship in society, connectedness, togetherness, trust, there's no sustainable knowledge society in the making. But I think there is, because the knowledge space, the in-between space as I spoke of, and a city like Dubai is the perfect place to speak on this, because it's a plot of land It's a territory which connects all talents, all industries, all functions, all sectors who are going in to try to understand what is the future of knowledge. Then we can think about knowledge if it's a linear thing, as I said in the headline, or it's an exponential. There are some, I would say, truths about what this is all about. This is, at least last year, the Nobel Prize winner, award winner of economy, and it was said that the knowledge economy actually has a different effect on multiplication in growth, development, and jobs. We used to say that there's a traditional economy, it's a decrease of value and revenues, but linked to the multiplier effect, or you can actually say the multiplayer effect, because this is about the players on this in-between space, how to work together, because knowledge is so exponential. Think about, I was sitting in a cab last week, and the guy has said to me, I just changed job, and I posted on the internal site, and now it went out on LinkedIn, by the way. And he said, in 15 minutes, 39,000 people have seen that I have changed job. So that's the point of exponentiality, going viral. So let us have this as a backbone when we talk about how knowledge can develop, be cultivated, and spread. Because knowledge is about to be developed. It's also about to be stored. I mean, huge thing today is storage. Storage about what? Storage about energy. The storage about energy will change the whole business modeling for the energy sector. The same thing applies, in a sense, for knowledge. Developed, stored, and taken into the next, right? Using the knowledge. So if we use it the right way, we have this multiplier effect big time. It's also about knowledge and the ecosystem. Ecosystem is a thing where a lot of things connects. So you can say in a way it's about connectivity, but as I said, it's about human beings. It's also about contactivity. Do we have contact in society? Do we share the same dreams and visions? Do we understand how much this future is about both values and not least technologies? So in this ecosystem, we tried to come up with a formula which says, what is the future of knowledge? Well, knowledge issues and demands are huge issues today. Are we in the nations, we will soon see, there are a completely different approach of understanding to assess the skills need. There's also a different approach to understand the technology needs for the future. And that is how we can take this together. So number one is knowledge issues and demands. We need to know the issues. And by the way, industries today are moving from a traditional way of thinking, like transportation, public transport, aviation, automotive, that industries are moving into a new configuration, an industry called mobility. Healthcare is moving into an industry called well-being, which connects Nike's latest shoes with technology in the foot to connect to your iPhone. Say, oh, well, this is my heartbeat right now. This is the well-being system. So the issues are important. The industry is a kind of a historical fact, and the SNI codes need to be redeveloped and refreshed for the future. Second is the knowledge creators and innovators, like yourself. We are here, we are doing things, we think new thoughts, we connect, we get new ideas, and off we go. So the actors is not being on the stage, it's being the people on the ground in the schools, preschools, universities, those who get new curriculums, teach and trained, and vocational training, and so on. It's to widening the perspective of education. It's to widening the perspective of entrepreneurship, because we think about entrepreneurship as a business thing, but it's about academic entrepreneurs, societal, social entrepreneur, and business, of course, but also political entrepreneur. Political entrepreneurs is needed. Why? Because we need new regulations about how should we go and look upon knowledge, when we should store it and develop it, and how we should find regulations, not least to the coming or the history and the future, together, the big data. Big data as a currency in this ecosystem to be stored and developed and used. And then the third is knowledge enablers and facilitators. A lot of platforms, a blockchain, or the people who create spaces for knowledge development. That's a part of this ecosystem. And finally, number 4, knowledge cultivators and users. How do we cultivate knowledge? If we look upon this as a tree, we need to understand that the fruit on this tree, low-hanging fruits we sometimes talk about, which is knowledge to easily gain and to take and to use, those fruits, that's the past. And the roots is the future. So that's why you and I and we together are so important for how do we cultivate knowledge, how do we use it, because if we do it right, hopefully, we will create a lot of wisdom. We will have wisdom, we will have discernment, and it's very interesting when we are thinking about the term skills, which actually comes from the up north, Norway and Iceland countries, and the word skills means the power of discernment. So the question is, can we discern here today, having piled of knowledge? Can we discern between stupidity and wisdom? How to apply it in a great way? How to use it? Because everything is out there. The question is, how do we take it, pull it together, reframe it, refresh it, and upload it? Because we are here, I think, in this summit to upload knowledge, not to download knowledge and make a little twist and tweak. Innovation is about uploading new ideas to a greater platform, to a greater society. So having said that, the next slide is about how do we have visions for steps to the future. And we can talk about information. That's statistics, that's facts. We can talk about the next, which is knowledge. And that to put this information in the context, to say, we like to measure the visibility of the discussion of social media, of blockchain, or biotechnology. It's a great thing. We now have knowledge. But then, do we then have understanding? To go from knowledge to understanding is probably the most hard thing to accomplish. To internalize it, to get it as your own, as an asset in your life. So it's about being applied in your sector, in your area of work, in your profession. Then we can say, well, we can maybe come to skills. Experience gives wisdom, because now I've done it, and I see it, and I learn individually, corporately, and together. So we get into kind of a also tacit knowledge, because we know what will happen if we do X, Y, or Z, because experience-based. At the same time, new parameters and dimensions will come to us, so we need to be very open to take in new knowledge, reflect upon it, and that was probably will create the good societal growth. Inclusive growth and sustainable growth, green growth, and we can have what we sometimes call a new capitalism. It's about the financial capital is growing, yes, but only if human capital grows. Human capital and skills and intellectual capital is the backbone for creating a solid financial growth. Then we have to take into account the environmental capital, the political capital, and the infrastructural capital. And the word capital actually means head. It doesn't mean money. So all these capitals is important pieces of the ecosystem of knowledge development. And this is also about the personal corporate motivation for us to understand the needs for the new skills and so on. And it's also about leapfrogging from this context of knowledge up to the skills. And that is about the new focus of the future skills. We see today big industries, automotive, financial industry, we can take different examples, are actually questioning and asking themselves, what is the skills needed for the future? So that is a situation we are in today, trying to explore together how do we find these solutions and how do we look upon this into the next step in our journey which we have embarked on together. If I try to make a very quick summary of what we did last year and this year, how we looked upon knowledge, what was really the driving forces, and what can we learn from past, today, and into the future. The number one, and the yesterday position is that it's a very traditional statistics of input indicators. A lot of money, a lot of persons, we measure the input. And we talk about knowledge management, and knowledge is not very easy to manage, by the way. We can see with Cambridge Analytica, a company was teared down because of very good reasons, I think. But the knowledge was still there because it was not been taken away. What does that mean? We will soon discuss that topic. It's quantity and volume. It's a research focus. It's a proactive spirit. Sometimes we come too early into the process. It's a standardization. Everything, I mean, one size fits all. It's sometimes business ignorance, not business intelligence. And it's a low knowledge volatility. So that could be a way of describing the history. Today, maybe we have a more focus on output indicators, KPI, key performance indicators. We talk about also new indicators, actually in these reports, and that's about the most important thing, the impact indicators. So, and then it's about the knowledge leadership, from knowledge to leadership. So knowledge is about to being led. Persons are being led. Maybe it's today, as someone said, today we are over-managed but under-led. And that is a very important thing, because people need to get energized of a knowledge journey. And we together have to ask ourselves very important questions, how this is about. So now we're coming into a real-time experience. It's about social media, which we'll soon hear more about. What are people talking about on these topics, on the key issues like blockchain or biotechnology or AI and so on and so forth? These are key things to understand now, here and now, not 2-year-old or 6 months years old KPIs or statistics in a database. What is the discussion now? What is the sentiment? What is the point of view in my country, Sweden, in UAE, in China, in US? And try to understand where are we moving in a navigation of digital possibilities real time. A reactive spirit, non-standardization, more intelligence, and now we're moving in from knowledge into knowing. We know more, we know how to do, we know how to scale up, and so on and so forth. And we have an increased knowledge volatility. And here we see these different platforms which has been used, and with Laurent Probst will soon, or I would say Professor Laurent Probst will soon speak about this topic. And so what's the future aspirations? Well, it's about new relevant impact indicators, key IIs. It's to integrate the position, the direction, and speed. We will speak about that in a seminar tomorrow, so we don't do it now. And now we come to a knowledge flow perspective. I said knowledge was flowing. When Cambridge Analytica was teared down, the knowledge was still flowing. And the question is, what's the landscape of our industry? What's the landscape of our nation? How do we capture and develop these things? It's machine learning, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and all of those things. And it's also about imagination, about how we anticipate the unknown futures. So you can say we are moving now from knowledge to the knowing to the unknown. And that's why we need to understand the tacit knowledge aspect. We need to know the wisdom aspect on this. So we see an increase of volatility. And it's about the density of knowledge. It's about the friction. Is it easy or not to access and to take it forward? And it's about the frequency. The number of iterations of how we learn from the knowledge curves in our companies, in our schools, in the society of tomorrow. We also have been reflecting upon the fact that there are different aspects. And this is about human focus or a machine focus.
Mr. Jan, sorry, I just want to remind you of the time, yeah?
Yes. And the point is that we met a kind of human robot here 2 years ago on this stage. And we said, okay, let's think about the human focus or the machine focus, and the explicit knowledge and the tacit knowledge. So we see here machine, explicit, big data analytics, and Internet of Things. We see human focus and explicit traditional education, which has to be revitalized. We see also machine focus and experience knowledge of the AI and the machine learning thing. And I would say the most important thing for us here today is the skills and wisdom, the human creativity. If we take those things in together, we can say it's not about human or robots, it's about both. And this is the robot, the humanoid we met 2 years ago. So that's both. And finally, let me say, that it's over, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Yan. Thank you. Thank you for this presentation that conceptualized knowledge and different approaches. Now let's move to the report, actually, now that we've laid down the grounds for that, with Mr. Professor Laurent. You are a partner at PwC. Please come in. Let's all welcome him. He's a partner at PwC. He works with research institutes, companies, governments, on subjects like data, cybersecurity, biomedicine, etc. He will present the findings of the report that was done this year. So this is the second report, the second edition of the Future of Knowledge. What should governments do? How they should think about building and reinventing their strategies when it comes to sharpening and getting their skills, the skills ready for the job market. Please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I would like to share with you, I would say, the key highlights of this report very rapidly, and then to open the discussions with the audience and in the panel. So let's move to the... So which are the objectives of this report? First one is we need new data. We need new data to understand this data economy. We cannot work only on the traditional statistics to monitor the development of AI or monitor the development of blockchain. We need to build the real data sets to be able to monitor in a quite real time the development of our societies. Then we need to identify also the signals where we can see a country, a city, a corporate going into the right or wrong direction, and building a new knowledge or not building this required knowledge. The objective was also to assess the performance of a set of countries across the globe with different level of maturity, different level of knowledge foundation, and then to provide them with a toolbox to accelerate their development. So these were the objectives of this report. Then, in terms of approach, we decided to focus on 4 technologies: biotechnology, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and cybersecurity. And then to look at one specific dimension, which is what is the future of skills on these technologies by countries. And we selected 40 countries. And then you can see on the slide 4 groups of countries clustered on a cluster based on the Global Knowledge Index performance. The leaders, the strong countries, moderate and modest countries. I'll come back to that in a moment. What we developed is a model, is a framework in which for each technology like artificial intelligence, we build an AI awareness index by country, looking at all the activities in the education, R&D, RDI, technology, economy, and enabling environment. For instance, if a country was issuing a new regulation on artificial intelligence, this was picked up into the index. Or a new university of the same country developing a new master in artificial intelligence, it was picked up into the index. And we developed that approach, the same approach for the 5 dimensions. So our methodology was focused on 2 steps. One was a data collection. We collected data in 22 languages. We went through, I would say, thousands of public sources, millions of public sources. All available public sources were scanned and screened during these 2 years. And then in phase 2, we done the analysis. We have done the analysis based really on the frequency of mentions and the engagement of a mention, meaning to what extent a mention, a press release, for instance, was really disseminated through the different channels. And then from that, we developed a framework for a policy toolbox to help governments, leaders, mayors, corporate leaders to improve their knowledge trajectory. So as an example, you can see, you will see in the report on the section on artificial intelligence, all the mentions across the last year and all the level of engagement. The interesting thing about this methodology is the fact that we can go back to each individual mention. So we can understand why we have a peak or why we have a down. If you have a peak, we can go back, for instance, to one specific event. Could be a policy development, could be a RDI finding, could be a new education curriculum, could be a specific event, could be also a scandal somewhere. That's clear. So this methodology could help us to really understand to what extent a country develops, I would say, the right knowledge trajectory. We also developed a country profile. So you have in the report 40 countries, 40 independent country reports, where you have the positioning. I will put the laser, if it's work, here. Right, not so. So on the left up, you will see the country positioning on these 5 dimensions and technologies. On the right side up, you will see the split and the performance of a country on the Global Knowledge Index. Down left, you will see the overall level of mentions on the 4 technologies. And on the right down, you will see, I would say, a kind of an assessment of a level of performance of a country on the different dimensions. So this is a very important tool, and we will improve this tool in the future to understand a country performance. So now let's go to the key results and key findings. Here on this graph, we will compare the global skills awareness index on the left with the global technology awareness index. And you can see, we can see 3 country, I would say, clustering. The first one, on up right, you can see some countries like Singapore, Mexico, Luxembourg, with a stronger technology awareness index than future of skills index. What does it mean? It means that this country took a very strong technological approach. The adoption of technology is very strong in this country. They created a technology culture everywhere, at the government level, at the education level, at the RDI level, at the economy level. People are focused on technology development. This is very important. If you look at the left side, we can see that these countries did not embrace the skills requirement for these technologies yet. That could be a problem for these countries. Okay, that's first kind of country. The second kind of country is, second group of countries are countries with a stronger skills awareness index compared to technology index. And here we have, I would say, the major problem here is linked to countries which are in a crisis mode with education. We can mention Bangladesh, Turkey, Chile, or Netherlands. They have a crisis with teachers. They have a shortage of teachers. So today, the level of mentions on the left side is really driven by a crisis. On the right side, on the technology, I think they try to develop their own technology. But here, the main problem is really the crisis on the, I would say, skills dimension. And then the other countries, the third group, have a quite of a balance index between technology and skills. Now, if you look into the different technologies, artificial intelligence, what we can see some countries performing better, like Luxembourg, Mexico, Singapore, Switzerland, or United Kingdom. What is very interesting to see is that all these countries have developed a national AI strategy supported by different stakeholders, education, RDI, or economy. RDI play a key role in adopting and creating the new knowledge on these technologies. And then we have seen also that, for instance, here in UAE, there was a clear development and a clear implementation of a UAE strategy, with UAE AI strategy, with, for instance, with Smart Dubai, the implementation of the AI toolkit, which operationalize this strategy. On cybersecurity, we can see that the main theme was about data protection regulation. And again, you can see a set of countries which look like the same. And we can see some overlap between AI and cybersecurity. But here, the problem is really about creating an enabling environment for cybersecurity, mobilizing the different stakeholders, creating a national cybersecurity platform. On biotechnology, we can see that most of the, I would say, findings on biotechnology are linked to RDI findings, meaning new outcomes, new patents. And we can see that some countries like Mexico, Switzerland, UK, Bangladesh, and Singapore have developed very new strategies. That's why they are on top of the list here. New partnerships, new international partnerships to develop their knowledge. Then on blockchain, clearly also same countries, Singapore, Malaysia ranked second, Mexico, Luxembourg, and Switzerland. Aside the Bitcoin discussion, most of these countries became, in their regions, the #1 place for accessing blockchain infrastructures led by public, I would say, initiatives. And this is a very important point. And for instance, in the case of Mexico, Mexico has created really the most important regional hub for blockchain crypto assets. So clearly what we see is that to better navigate, to better understand the future, the adoption of strategies on these new technologies create a real momentum for all countries. And they can learn faster, even if, I would say, I will go through. The future of skills is not yet there. So we can see that, for instance, on future of skills, clearly the key countries like Turkey, Bangladesh, or Chile and Netherlands are on a crisis, what I said before, and Finland is really one of the excellent examples as a role model for skills, for the future of skills. All the others are dealing with crisis. And overall, we can say that in most of countries, the overall debate, discussion, strategy on skills is very weak. And this is, we'll come back to that in a moment, this is a key point. So, our recommendation is for leaders to really think about their knowledge trajectory. And on the left, on the y-axis, you can see the future of, I would say, technology index, and you have on the X of a global knowledge index. And the objective is here to think about how to navigate to improve the positioning of countries with building new knowledge as a pathway to the achievement of SDGs. So we looked at 6 key enablers: general enabling environment, ICT, education, RDI, economy, and funding. And when we grouped, I would say, the countries against the 2 axes, meaning the global technology awareness and the global knowledge index, we can see 4 groups of countries. I will try with a laser here, just to show you. No, I think it's not working. So you can see on the upper right, clearly the blue countries. And these countries, some years ago, did not have a very strong knowledge index. So they went through the new technologies to increase their knowledge foundation. So the new technologies could be considered as an accelerator for creating new knowledge. You have the red countries. You can see red countries, very strong knowledge foundation, but not so good in terms of new knowledge awareness index. This is a wake-up signal for these countries, except UAE, where UAE is progressing on both dimensions. But countries like, for instance, Sweden, we have to question Sweden right now. What does it mean? Is Sweden on the right way or not? Then we have the countries in the middle, the black countries, and we can see that also navigating up with an increased investment on technologies could help countries to move to a better knowledge foundation, like Mexico, for instance. And then you have countries, the green countries, which are, they could progress, they could improve clearly their knowledge foundation and their technology awareness, but they could also take the technology avenue as a way to speed up their development. Here we can see the same graph, but with in y-axis we have a future skills awareness. And you can see that I would say the graph is more flat, meaning that, as I said, the knowledge, the future of skills problem is not so much taken into consideration by most of the countries, not at the right magnitude in any case. So in a conclusion, clearly the countries with a strong knowledge foundation have clearly a higher capacity to discuss and adopt new technologies. Country national strategies on new technologies are essential instruments to really create a new momentum in a country, to align stakeholders, and then to create new projects. Very few countries have really taken the problem of the future of skills. And some countries already face a big crisis, like shortage of teachers or real big discussions on teacher status. Oops. And the last slide is just a set of, I would say, first recommendations from the toolbox. In the general enabling environment, clearly taking into account enabling proactive national strategies with local stakeholders and international partners will really create a momentum. Then also the digitalizations of e-government service will help also the private sector to digitalization itself, and then to create a technology uptake. On the education, a new skills strategy is required. And in most of countries, we need now a minister of skills. In most of countries, we do not have a minister of skills. Then on ICT, it's about building connectivity, infrastructures, and education programs. On RDI, it's about building new partnerships with the most advanced countries, which could share a lot of knowledge and could facilitate the development of it. On economy, it's about focusing on the local value chain, involving SMEs, and then built on the new technologies to serve the local economy. And then on funding, with the right strategies, with the right alignment of stakeholders, clearly this is a way of mobilizing local and international funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Laurent. I'll actually, we still have a couple more minutes for some questions. I'll start with you, Mr. Laurent. Picking up on the presentation that you just gave and the main findings. You picked in the report, you with of course, everyone who pitched in, you picked 4 technologies that you worked on, including AI, including blockchain, etc. But we all know that in today's space of technological advancement and the exponential like growth and speed that technologies are having, how can we make sure that if a government starts working or building their strategies according to certain technologies like those 4, in a couple of years, those will be obsolete. So what should be done in order for governments to stay on top when it comes to this Moore's dilemma? It's not a dilemma, it's like a challenge, I would say.
It's a challenge. So I think the key point is to understand for a country which technologies are strategic. For instance, we can consider water technologies as a key strategic asset for a country. So then, and that could be in the plan for next year, to integrate water technologies or health technologies in our benchmark to be able to measure the positioning of countries regarding these kind of technologies. This is totally feasible.
Okay. Mr. Yan, now a question to you. One of the enablers that were identified for governments to build their strategies on when it comes to developing strategies related to skills, building the right skills for the future, is education. Education is supposed to be very fluid and agile, but most of the times, especially the universities, it gets stuck and quite obsolete as well. So how do you see governments should look at the education sector and communicate with these sectors and with these stakeholders to guarantee you know, this flow and this communication on the right skill set and the exchange of information?
Well, first of all, I think these nations need to ask themselves the question, should they consume or create a legacy? If they have the ambition to create a legacy, the education sector is the key one, which means also I think we need to revitalize it. We need to get relevant because the curriculums are old-fashioned and the speed of renewal is too slow. And we have to open it up because I think there is so much knowledge and so much good curriculums that could be adopted and utilized, and instead of try to reinvent the wheel all the time. So I would say it's to sometimes deregulate, but it's also about to speed up the process and to get the right actors in and make it as broad as possible, because education is the base to open the society for growth.
It's interesting you speak of deregulation. I want to ask you, Mr. Laurent, of course, the governments have a lot of responsibility to orchestrate all the efforts when it comes to bringing the right skill set or preparing the workforce to have the right skill set. But do you think having a centralized decision is a good choice, especially that the world is moving towards getting rid of third parties? I'm not implying anything, but should there be like a leader in this, or should there be more of a communication between different decision makers or decision hubs?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both, because you need to some extent today that governments take their role very seriously about the future of regulation in some domains, like, for instance, artificial intelligence. But at the same time, they have really to create also an enabling environment. So the communication and the ongoing discussions with public and private stakeholders is key to define this, I would say, good regulation. We see a big debate today in Europe where we have, I would say, the tech provider saying we don't need any regulation, and you see some think tank recently issued a white paper on the future of European regulation, asking for a certification of any algorithm, any AI algorithm. So what is the right policy?
Balance, yeah.
What is the right balance into that? Cannot be fixed only by a government, cannot be fixed only by one corporate. We need to find out the new governance model for that.
I think the biggest challenge that this report highlights is anticipating the future skills. Is there like a magic portion or anything that governments should start with, like right now? Because like you've talked about, like, and the report talks about bringing everyone together to develop strategies. But we often hear a lot about new initiatives. Now the tricky part is to see the results. How should we think about this?
So I think clearly the recommendation that we do is clearly to have, for any country, any region, any city, it's about a national upskilling investment plan, upskilling priority, meaning upskilling the civil servant, upskilling the workforce. It's about upskilling 20–30% of the workforce which might be at risk tomorrow, upskilling the young people which are out of the education system to make sure that they are still they can manage a good level of employability in the near 18 months.
Let's have a more of a practical question now. This region is known to be on top of things when it comes to initiative related to ICT, to education, to bringing AI and new technologies, and it's doing really, really well. But when it comes to job, and we see, especially like from like where I stand, also big companies, big corporations, when it comes to creating their own product, they don't use the labor force that is here. So this is a huge problem when it comes to our labor force in the region. What do you think of that? How should we solve this, Mr. Yan or Mr. or Laurent, or both?
Well, I think one thing is it's an attitude, and to change thinking of how to train our people, how to find a new in-between space with those who comes with knowledge and the knowledge we have, and to get that process, energized from two ends, and to also find ways about how do you find regulations which create incentives for this knowledge sharing, because the issue of brain drain around the globe is very key. And as Laurent said, there is some really weak signals to be interpreted, and I think what is going on here is very impressive in many ways. And the question is, how do we learn from the best, like Finland and Singapore, and how do we take that best practice approach into the best option for UAE? And I think that has started in a great way. There's more to do, and the way of attracting these companies and, just people coming with knowledge, to get them engaged in societal processes, I would say is a key thing.
I think the key point is for I would say, public leaders now to upskill the local workforce. It's fundamental, because we can drive a lot of new strategy, we can drive a lot of new AI, blockchains, whatever, but companies will need people to learn fast, to adapt to these technologies, whatever the technology is. And clearly, in any country today, governments have to upskill massively in a very rapid moment, in a very rapid way, their people. I think this is, for what we see, one of the most societal challenge, most urgent societal challenge today. And tomorrow we will have a session around 3, I think in the same location, where we will explain in a detailed way which are the key ways to upskill at a large scale.
Also, another challenge is inequality, right? Technological advances impose inequality because they don't reach everyone in the labor force, and so we have not only a skills gap, but also like inequality within the skills gap. So, how would you think? What would you advise governments? What would be the right approach to or in thinking of inequality when setting up those strategies?
Well, I think the school system generally is the key and the backbone for all kind of knowledge development. So I think it's about changing some pieces in the education system, from the preschooling and up to the university level, and to take in new approaches, and also to find ways to collaborate with those who are here. And I think as I said, the process has really started, but I think it's time to maybe to accelerate, and to find new ways, because it boils down to one thing in the school system. Do we create trust between the people for technology, for government, for the big techie companies? And that needs, in a sense, a critical, positive thinking to understanding how do we apply, as I said, how do we go from knowledge to wisdom in using this? And that's a school issue, and it's a parents issue, it's a societal issue. How do we look upon this knowledge development so we can have an inclusive and equal growth, creating opportunities, because it's easy today that people are cut off because of technology, at the same time as technology is driving the society. And that is a key issue for governmental leaders.
Yeah. Mr. Laurent?
Yeah. I think in a very concrete way, we need specific tailored solutions for disadvantaged communities. We need these solutions aim to upskill them for new kind of jobs, clearly, which could be related to data management, data compliance, or web development, or coding, through specific boot camps. Because we need a specific approach for them in order to really reinforce their self-confidence, recreate their employability on the market, and create trust with potential companies. And that's really the key point. We cannot apply the same program for all. We need for these disadvantaged communities to be able to bring them with a specific tailored program to make sure that in 3 to 6 months they are back to the job market.
Yeah, and maybe like more work needs to be done with the social initiatives that are taken within like the government's initiatives. When we speak inclusion, we speak, of course, about women in the labor force who suffer, who have more specific problems. I'll put it this way: when it comes to catching up to the skills needed. Do you feel that there should be policies only targeting women from governments, maybe not worldwide, but maybe when we think about certain regions or certain countries? What do you think? Should we consider them as like, like a separate group when we think of those strategies?
I think what we have seen is that in a very concrete, I would say, program, that when women are not considered as a special group, the results are very poor. So that's a way to also consider now.
So always consider women special.
Exactly.
Okay, so like so you're saying that there should be special attention given to this,
special effort, special program, because the reason of women exclusion could be different by country, could be different by market. So we have to be very careful to that and find out, again, a tailored solution for them.
I want to ask you, now that you and the team have set down the recommendations for governments, how would you see next year's report or like research happening? What is the next question? What is 2020's question when it comes to bridging the way to a better skill set or to have better skill sets nationwide?
I think one important piece in this is about how to leverage on technology and to create regulations. For example, big data is one very important thing. How can you utilize the big data and get access for the companies and for the people to apply this into innovation and creating new products, new services, and find ways with an ethical dimension as well to get people so we can move from, yes, this is what we see, this is the questions, this is the technology, but how do we scale it up and how do we make real work? How do we get some good growth out of society? How do we create new jobs? Because now people can access this data and they can apply it and they can develop a lot of things. I think that's only one important thing.
Do you have anything else?
Yeah, just one is about technology for good and sustainability, and building, I would say, reinforcing, improving the toolbox for helping leaders to really make a link between knowledge and sustainability and make sure that we have a kind of a human-centric approach into this program.
Yeah, not never to forget the human. I think we're out of time. Thank you so much, gentlemen. They will be discussing another session tomorrow about upskilling and
Upskilling.
yeah, about upskilling. So we'll be waiting for that. Thank you so much for listening.